Function is nothing but it is a set of statement that is mainly used or it will going to be performed a particular task. Executable statement. So here the statements that perform the necessary operation. Whatever we are going to write in between that opening and closing of a flower braces, every statement will going to be related to this particular function. Hello everybody, welcome to the first session on chapter 13, that is user defined functions. I am Rohini TS from the Department of Computer Science, Vidhyaashram Pre-University College, Temple of Excellence, Mysuru. In the first session, let me know you about the blueprint of this chapter, that is what is the marks distribution of this chapter. If you study this 13th chapter, that is user defined function, totally you are going to get 2 questions from this chapter, that is 1 mark 1 question will be there and you are going to get 1 5-mark question. Totally you are going to have 2 questions and that is for 6 marks. Then what and all we are going to learn in today's session. So that is what the content of today's session is. I am going to discuss regarding the definition of user defined function. Already we have discussed regarding the function, but then what is this user defined function? How it will be used? So what are its advantages or benefits of having this user defined function? And how we are going to define this. For example, if I wanted to use some of the library functions or a built-in function, that will be given or that will be processed by the compiler itself. But when I wanted to have my own kind of function, that is what we are going to call that as a user defined function. Then how we are going to define this? That is what will be the content of my today's session, that is functions definition or a structure of function that is related to user defined function. This and all the things that we are going to discuss in the today's session. So now you just recall what do you mean by function. As we all know that function is nothing but it is a set of statement that is mainly used or it will going to be performed a particular task. So when I wanted to perform a particular task, then we are going to use several set of statements. So together I can call that as a functions. Then what if I wanted to have my own kind of functions? For example, I wanted to find the square root of a given number. So I can call that as a square root of a given number. At that time, what we are going to do? So I have a library function called sqrt. That will going to give me the square root of a given number, right? So in order to have that particular library function, we have to have a header file that is called mat.h. So, and you can just consider cin and cout. So when I wanted to use cin and cout in our program, so it is mandatory or necessity to have a iostream.h header file. Then you just think about cin and cout. So that is what commonly used variables or commonly used objects in our program. Then if you think about the cin and cout, we are going to return or we have written some of the lines of code behind that. That is what the reason we are using it without any worries or without thinking about the code which has been written behind that particular variables or an objects of any of the programming languages. So when I wanted to have my own kind of functions or when I wanted to perform any kind of work or if I wanted to solve any kind of problem, then it is necessary to have a function. Mainly we are going to use a function in order to use that function repeatedly. For example, if I am using addition of 2 numbers, if I am using subtraction of 2 numbers repeatedly, then it is necessary to make that addition and subtraction as a function. Okay, so if you just consider addition and subtraction, for that we don't have any library functions or a built-in function. Then what I am supposed to do or how can I use that function in my program? That too with the help of user defined function. Here also function is nothing but that is a set of lines which is mainly used in order to perform a particular task. In order to perform a particular task which is given by the user. So it is mainly based on the problem which is facing by the user. If I wanted to solve addition of 2 numbers or if I wanted to have a subtraction of 2 numbers, that is what my own problem. I just wanted to solve that, but I wanted to use that function more time. That means I just wanted to use that addition and subtraction in our daily life, like in our programming more than one time. all the time. I cannot write a code for every time. For example, if I'm using addition and subtraction 5 times in my program, no need to write all the addition and subtraction functions 5 times again and again. So instead of that, I'm just going to make my own function that I will be calling that as a user defined function. I'm just using single code in a 5 times, that too in a single program, or I can use the same code in another programs also. That is what the main reason of having this user defined function. It is also a function that is defined by the user. Who is going to define this? User. So if it is defined by the compiler, I can say that as a library functions or a built-in function. When it is defined by the user, then we are going to call this as a user defined function. Why we are going to use this user defined function? That is mainly in order to solve his or her problem. So if it is a user, that could be what? Either person, one who is using or one who is writing a code for the particular program. Okay, in order to solve that problem, we are going to write a several set of code, that statements, collection of that statement in order to solve a problem of a user. Then we are going to call that kind of functions as a user defined function. So such a function can be called or invoked from anywhere and any number of times in the program. So as I told about the addition and subtraction. So how can I make it active? How can I make it call? Like how can I invoke those functions? I can call those functions, or I can make that function active. Like I can get the benefit out of that function anywhere in a program and any number of times in a program. So I can use that addition of n numbers, addition or subtraction of any number can be done any number of times or anywhere in the program. There is no restriction of having a user defined function should be in the main function or should be outside the main function. There is no restriction in the user defined function. If I wanted to have it before the main function, yes, I can have. If I wanted to be that user defined function even after the main function, then also we can have. There is no restriction of having user defined function anywhere in the program and any number of times in a program. That is the second point you guys have to remember. Then what is the use of having this user defined function? So the purpose of using a function is to make the program design process easy. So you just think one thing, like I have 100 lines of code. I have 100 lines of code. So when I'm making this as a function, like when I'm grouping that as a function in order to solve my own kind of problem, at that time I'm just going to write it one time. Okay, when I wanted to use the same function again in another program, then no need to write the same set of code from the scratch. So you can just use the same function which is already written, like it is reusable. You can use it anywhere in a program or any number of types in a program. So that is what the reason it will going to make a program design very easy, because it is like a modular approach. So we are going to write several set of codes in order to perform a particular task. If I wanted to perform the same task again and again, then I can use this function in my program. So it will going to make the design process easy and understandable, because it is a chunk of code. That means it is a several set of lines of code. So if there is any error, it will be easy for me to get to know what is the error in the particular block of a code. That is why it is easy and it is understandable. This will going to avoid the ambiguity. That means there is no confusions when I'm using this user defined function. So it is a function which is designed by or which is written by the user in order to solve his or her problem. Okay, that is the thing you have to remember. So now we'll see what are the advantages of having this user defined function. So now I got to know that what is user defined function. Then what are the advantages or what are the benefits that I'm going to get by making use of this user defined function. So what is the first advantage? If there is a set of statements to be repeated several times in the program, so these statements can be replaced as a function and called whenever and whenever required. So whenever and wherever it required, I can use a same set of code more than one time, like any number of times I can use it. For example, if I wanted to perform multiplication, okay, so you just consider now here I have written a code in order to perform the multiplication operation. Okay, so this will be in my program 1 and now I am writing program 2. So in the program 2 I have a code or I have a user-defined function for division. And I wanted to have a program 3. There I wanted to perform both multiplication as well as the division. So at this time what I'm going to do, I'm not at all going to write a code again from the scratch. So instead of that, for the multiplication function, I'm going to use the multiplication function which is already written in the program 1. That is, I can use here. And I wanted to perform the division of two numbers, but I don't wanted to write the same set of code again from the scratch. Then at the time, I'm going to use that particular statement from the program 2. Then my program 3 will be ready. When you wanted to have a several set of statements of a code needs to be repeatedly using, or if you are calling that, or if you are using or invoking that set of statements again and again, then it is easy for us to make that number of statements as a function. So here, instead of calling or instead of having this multiplication as a function, if I have written this as a normal code, then I can't use it in my program 3. But here I'm making that multiplication operation as a function, so that this function can be used anywhere in a program, wherever in the program, or whenever you require, you can use that several set of statement repeatedly without writing it again and again. That is what the first advantage that you have to remember. What is the second advantages? So if a task is needed in more than one program or to a group of programmers, a function can be developed and made available to other programs or other programmers. So this is same as the previous point itself. That means if I wanted to use a particular set of statement more than one time, even in my program or even in another program, okay, if I wanted to use this multiplication again in this program 1, I can use it. If I wanted to have it one more time, I can use it. What if I wanted to have this multiplication of two numbers even in another program? Then there is also possibility of having the user-defined function even in another programs. So that will going to help the programmers. So if I wanted to make a changes, for example, here I'm going to write the multiplication of two numbers. But if I wanted to have a multiplication of three numbers, so when it comes to here, I can just make some small changes and I can use the particular function which is already written as per my requirement. So this user-defined function will going to be used when there is a task which needs to be written or which needs to be executed or to be used in more than one program or can be used by more than one user or a programmer. Then also this kind of a situation can be utilized with the help of this user-defined function. Okay, whenever we require, wherever we require, we can use it any number of times and no need to write a same code again and again repeatedly. And if you wanted to have a set of statement needs to be executed repeatedly or needs to be used repeatedly, then you have to make that several set of statements as a functions. Next point, programs can be modularized into functions and each function can be developed independently, debugged and tested. What it means? So instead of writing this as 100 number of lines of code, I will just make it as two groups. That means what? Multiplication of two numbers and division of two numbers. So at that time, I can get two functions. One is multiplication and another one is division. So by making use of this user-defined function, it is possible to have a modularization in my program. That means you take an example. I just wanted to solve the last 5 years question paper. At that time, I should not assign the same work or I should not assign all the works to a single student. Instead of that, I will just going to make a group of 10 students and I will assign two question paper for 5 students and another two question paper for another 5 students. So there, I'm just going to assign them or I'm just going to insist them to you write all the 1 mark question and you write all the 2 marks and 3 marks question and you go with all the 5 marks question. So when I get the solution from each student, together I can merge it and I can call that or I can get the resultant at a time. Okay, so that means what? Instead of considering a problem as a single task, it needs to be modularized. So it needs to be divided into number of sub-programs or sub-modules, and each sub-modules will going to be developed, or it will going to be debugged, tested. Everything will going to be takes place independently. At last, if I merge everything, then there will be no mistakes or there will be no errors, because like for example, 5 lines of code has been written and it has been debugged, tested, everything got over. So there is no error from that particular 5 lines of code. And if I consider another function which is having 100 lines of code, even independently it will going to be checked, or it will going to be developed, tested, debugged, everything got over. When I'm merging those two functions, there will be no errors at all. That means when I'm having this user defined function, at the time it can be modularized into number of functions, and each function will going to be act independently, and I can modularize that function and we can test it separately, or I can debug it separately. Development, everything will going to be takes place separately, and it will going to reduce the time for the development, and it will be very easy in order to debug. So for example, if it is having 100 lines of code and another number of statements having 200 lines of code, then total length of that particular program will going to be 300 lines of code. But if I'm making this as a 3 functions, so that is based on the number of operations, or based on the particular type of operation going to do, we are just going to make it as a group of 3 functions. So at that time, I just need to concentrate only at the particular function. So I'm just going to take first 100 lines of code as a function 1, and another 100 lines of code as a function 2, and remaining number of statement as a function 3. And each function will going to be checked independently, and it will going to be tested, debugged. If something goes wrong, errors is there, everything will going to be takes place and rectified independently. That will be easier for the user or a developer or a programmer. So that kind of privileges can also be going to be have with in the user defined function. So these are the point you have to remember, and we have some more advantages. That is what? If a problem is divided into sub problem, a team of programmers can be formed to solve each sub problem rather than solving by a single person. Already I have taken the example of writing a solution for 5 model paper. So at that time, what we are supposed to do, instead of giving a same task to a single person, I'm just going to distribute it to number of students, or I'm just going to distribute it to number of programmers. At that time, work can be done in a fast manner, and it will be more efficient, it will be somehow error free. Everything will going to be takes place independently. So that will also going to be done with the help of this user defined function. So the problem needs to be divided into number of sub problem. That is possible when we are using this user defined function. Instead of considering as a complete program, I'm just making a particular set of statement as a function. Then it will be independent, modular, and it will be standardized in nature. Next, if the functions are developed in a program, the number of line decreases. So how can I say this as a decreases? Already I told you that when I'm using as a function, or if I'm using several set of statements as a function, that is what most of the time we are repeatedly using that several set of statement, then only I am going to make that as a functions. So for example, if I wanted to use the C in and C out in my program, then somehow it is impossible to write the code for that C in and C out all the time when we are using that in our program. So instead of that, we have a code which is already written to the C in and C out. So without worrying about the work which has been done at the back, without worrying about what is his source code and all, we are simply calling, or we are simply using that C in and C out in my program. So when I'm using this user defined function, at the time, no need to write all the function code from the scratch. If it is already written, if it is already developed, I can just use it in my program. I can use it anywhere in my program, and how many times I require, I can use it, and wherever I require, I can use it. So these are the advantages which comes under user defined functions. Okay, so these are the points you have to remember when it comes to the user defined functions, advantages or benefits of having this user defined functions. So now we'll see how this user defined function will going to be defined. Very important question for 5 marks. So this is important question, how the definition of user-defined function will going to takes place. That is function definition or a structure of user-defined function, how it will going to be look like in a program. So till now I have talked much regarding this user-defined function. Then how it look like? So already we have discussed regarding the function, how it must be. But what if I am having my own kind of functions? Then what are the syntax or the semantics that we are supposed to follow when we are having this in our program? We'll see now. So here you have to consider we have two parts in the user-defined function. So one is function header and another one is body of the function. So we have a two parts, one is function header and another we have a body of a function. So now we'll see what is this head of a function or a function header will comprises of and what is the body of a function will comprises of. So you just have a look here, return type specifier, and we have a function name and argument list with a declaration. Okay, so here I don't have a much space, that is why I have written this argument list in the next line. So but when you are writing this as a syntax, so you have to write it in a single line. Okay, so return type specifier. So we have a 6 parts or 5 parts in this total structure of a user defined function. I will tell you how we are supposed to remember. Okay, then we have a opening and closing of a flower braces. So whatever we are going to write in between that opening and closing of a flower braces, every statement will going to be related to this particular function. Return type specifier, function name, and I have a list of arguments with its declaration that is related to function header. And when it comes to the body of a function, there it comprises of a local variable declaration and executable statements 1, 2, 3 up to n number of statements. And at last we have a return of expression. So you just make a point. I will consider this return type specifier as a first point and function name as a second point and argument list as a point 3 and this opening and closing of flower braces as a point 4 and these number of statements as a point 5 and at last we have a return type that I will consider that as a point 6. So now we'll see about this return type specifier. So already I have discussed regarding the definition of a function. What it is? So it is a set of statement which is written in order to perform a particular task. After performing that particular task, it has to return something back to the function. That is what the function is all about. So here return type specifier that specifies what kind of data it is going to hold or what kind of the data after the calculation it is returning back to the function. Okay, so this return type specifier it's like a data type. So already we have discussed regarding a int, float, void, boolean, that kind of data types that I have discussed. So here when I meant return type specifier, it specifies the type of a value that it will going to return. Okay, that is return types specifier. So after that in the second point we have a function name. What it indicates? So function name is nothing but it is a name of a function. So why we all have a name? In order to recognize or in order to get to know who is that. So in the same way, if I wanted to get to know what is the function or what function we are using in a program, then it is mandatory to have this name of a function because there could be a possibility of having any number of function in my program, but all the functions should not be a same name. I have to give several unique name for each function. Then only it will be easy for me to in order to get to know what is this function is all about. So we are going to use this function name. Okay. So next we have a within the parenthesis we have a argument list with a declaration. So if I just ask you how you are going to prepare the biryani, what are the things that you require in order to prepare a biryani? So at that time what and all you are going to specify? You are just going to specify what are the items that you require, right? We require rice, water and some spices, veggies. So that and all the things that you are going to specify. In the same way, if I wanted to perform some of the operation in my function, then what are the variables I require? That is what we are going to list as a argument list with a declaration. For example, if I wanted to find addition of two numbers, how many variables I require? I require two variables. One is what? Variable 1 and variable 2. After adding those two values, I have to store it somewhere else. So that is what we are going to use as a local variable declaration. Okay, so you just remember argument list, and also I am going to discuss regarding the types of arguments in my further classes. So here, as of now, you just remember here we have to specify what is the data type of a variable and what is the argument list it comprises of. So if there is no arguments, or if I am not using any variable for my operation, then it will be blank. That means it will going to be just opening and closing of a parenthesis. Okay, so that indicates that it does not contain any arguments. So this is regarding 1, 2, 3. What is the point number 4? That is curly braces or a opening and closing of a flat braces. So whatever I am going to write in between that will going to be related to this particular function in a program. So what we have in that, we have a local variable declarations. So when I am doing some operation, what are the local variables I require? That means which is related to this opening and closing of a flat braces. What are the variables that I am going to use in my function or in my particular user defined function? That specifies the local variable declaration. So after that, executable statement 1, 2, 3, 4 up to n numbers. So this executable statements is nothing but whatever the operation that you are going to do in the particular function, you are going to write some of the several set of codes. That codes is nothing but executable statement, and it can be of any number of statement that you are going to write. So now I am done with the declaration, and I have given some name for the function, and I have listed out what are the arguments or parameter that I require from my function, and I have declared some local variables, and I am doing some operation. After doing all these things, what it has to do? It has to return some value back to the main function. So that is what, after doing all these operation, it has to return some value back to the main function. That is what we are going to call that as a return of expression. That expression can be either constant, variables, or any of the values that it will going to return. Okay, so this is how we are going to have a definition of a user defined function, or it is also termed as a structure of a user defined function. Okay, so here function header that comprises of return type specifier and function name along with a list of an arguments or a parameter, and this body of a function comprises of local variable declaration and executable statement along with a return values. So let me take one example to make you understand that how we are going to use all these statements in our program. Okay, so we'll see what about this return types specifier. So here return type specifier, it is just a data type of the value that it will going to be returned by the function to another function. For example, if I am using int, what it indicates? Return type is int here. So let me go with the next one, that is function name. It is nothing but it is the name of a function. So it will be helpful for me in order to identify a particular function in my program. Let me consider I am using a function name called sum. Okay. Next, argument list with a declaration. How we are going to declare the arguments? That is within the parenthesis. So this argument is nothing but list of arguments or a parameter. Remember dear students, arguments is also termed as a parameter. Both are same. Okay, argument list or a parameter list that we are going to specify, or it is also variables with their declaration. So each arguments needs to be separately need to be declared. So I will take one example here. Int is a return type and sum is the name of a function. Now I wanted to perform addition of two numbers. Then how many variables or arguments I require? I require two arguments. That is what, let me consider that as int a. What is the point? If I am having more than one variable in a same function like a list of arguments, it needs to be separated by a comma. So I will put comma here. Then I will write it as a int b and I will close the parenthesis. So it indicates what? I have a function called a sum and its return type specifier is integer. After doing sum of the operation, it will going to return a value which will be of a data type integer, and the function name is sum, and I have a two argument list, that is I have a two variables for my operation called sum, and I have specified with a comma. That means we are separating the variables here, that is int a comma int b. After that I have a opening of a curly braces. So what is the next statement? We'll see now. So after this declaration, so we should not put semicolon over there. So after the declaration of a return type specifier, then function name, and I have a list of arguments, at last I should not put semicolon. If I put semicolon over there, that only terminates there itself. Then it won't take me to the inside of that function. There you have to remember, you should not put semicolon after the function name along with a list of arguments. Then all these line, that particular line, return type, function name and list of arguments will be termed as head of a function, or the complete line is considered as a function head. Okay, and there should not be no semicolon. Okay, then I have a opening and closing of flower braces. So in between I have a local variable declaration. So this declaration of a variables that are used within the function, whatever the variables that I am going to declare will going to be have a scope or can be used only within a particular function. So let me consider here, after this I am going to take a variable called int c. So why I am taking c here? After addition of a and b, that needs to be stored somewhere else. So that is what the reason I am using int c. This is local variable declaration. So now we'll see the next point, that is executable statement. So here the statements that perform the necessary operation. So now what I wanted to do, I wanted to perform addition of two numbers. Then how I am going to write? We'll see now. So here c is equal to a plus b. So I am just going to use this a plus b as my variables, and I am adding those two variables. Whatever the value that I am going to give will going to be stored in a variable, local variable called c, that is related to executable statement. And if the function is returning a value, a return statement should be included. Otherwise, return statement is not necessary. So now, after doing this addition of two numbers, if it is returning something back to the function, then we have to include a return statement. Okay. So if the function is not returning anything, then no need to use that return statement. Here, I just wanted to return addition of two numbers to my function, to my main function. So I'm just going to use return statement. So what my return function will going to return here? So it will going to return the value of c, semicolon. Okay, and I'm going to just close the parenthesis that indicates the closing of that particular function. Okay, so now you can see that this is nothing but return type specifier and sum is a function name, and these two are the list of argument. There should not be semicolon. No semicolon is to be used at a function header. Okay, so what it is? This is function header, and opening and closing of flat braces I have. Within that, first I have a local variable declaration. So this is local variable. And what I can call this operation, this is the statement which is used for the execution. So I can call this as a executable statement. So this opening and closing of flat braces is my fourth point. And here we have several local variable declaration and executable statement. That is what? Fifth point. At last it has to return something back to the main function. So I can make this as a 0.6. So what it is returning? After doing some of the operation, it has to return something back to the main function. That is why we are using return of c. So int is a return type, sum is the name of the function, and a and b are the argument with its declaration. I am declaring it as a int data type, and local variable is c, and this is the executable statement. C is equal to a plus b. It is returning something back to the main function. The return value is c. So combining of these local variables, executable statement and return statement, I can call all these together as a body of a function, and this indicates the function header. I hope you all understood regarding this. What is return type specifier, what is function name, what is list of an arguments, and what is local variable, what is function header, and what is function body, as well as local variable declaration and executable variable declaration. Together I can call that as a body of a function. So whatever the statement that I am going to write needs to be enclosed only between the opening and closing of a flat braces. So I hope you all understood regarding what is user defined function and what are the advantages of having this user defined function along with the structure of a user defined function. So in the next session we will be discussing regarding how can I make a call to a function. I wanted to use it more than one time. Then how can I use that? That is what? Calling of a function, and I have a main function, and we are going to learn with our returning a value, then function prototype and types of arguments. Already we got to know what is argument, that is parameter. Here also we have several types. So I will be discussing my next session. Along with that, we have a local variables, global variables and scope of a variables. This will be the content of my next session. I hope you all understood and enjoyed the session. Let me meet you in the next session. Until that, keep learning, keep growing. Thank you.